Hello, are we ready? Okay. Hello, this is Team Coastal Food and Fiber Production Committee. Here we have with us today
Bendik,
Mia,
Elida,
Arvan,
and me, Julia. We will now present a sample of the island of Hitra in Trøndelag 2040. Firstly, we will tell you a little bit how the situation was in 2020. Then Orawan and me will tell you about the situation in 2040 and what has improved. After that, Elida will tell you about the main impact points in the year 2040. We call them leverage points. In the end, Mia, Bendik, and Elida will lead you through the interventions on the island of Hitra. In 2020, an optimism spread along the coast in Norway. Salmon is the new oil, they said. With the right-winged government, coastal industry was focused on competitiveness and economical growth. Fishing workers were proud, and Trøndelag was big on salmon farming. But the Environment Directorate said that the biggest threat to wild salmon was escaped fish farmed salmon and salmon lice. The fish farms were mostly powered by diesel generators, as this was cheaper than renewable energy. As much as 98% of the fish was exported abroad. Also, the feed for the fish consisted mostly of soy produced and transported in the rainforest. The fishing industry accounted for large CO2 emissions both locally and internationally. Solutions were worked on, but these choices were largely governed by economic interests and goal of consistent growth. A lot of emissions from the open cage fish farms ended up in the seabed. Feces became nitrogen, which is an important source of nutrients for algae growth. This triggered toxic algae blooms and threatened other living organisms. Hydroponics and aquaponics took place on an international level, but were just on a research base here in Norway. The fish farms was usually located along the coast. The cages were open and large numbers of salmon escaped and mixed with the wild salmon each year. This could potentially destroy the entire wild salmon strains, as farmed salmon were not adapted to the local rivers in the same way. The salmon lice is a problem only occurred when a huge amount of salmon lived so close inside in the fish farm cage.
Open cage and fish farm along the coast led to many problems. Back then, land-based fish farm was the ideal solution, and it's been tested in the 2030s. But it wasn't sustainable and profitable on the wrong land, so most company goes bankrupt after a few years. But at the same time, was Salma at the forefront of offshore fish farming with Offshore Farm 1. They set a new standard which many companies would prove to follow. According to human consumptions in 2020, in Asia, many country has a lot of tradition of using this different kelp and seaweed in their daily diet, but in Norway it's not a common. Most people still had a little knowledge of kelp and seaweed, and the demand after animal product was still high. And in other words, seaweed and kelp in Norway was unpopular resource. Other thing is a lot of food was wrapped in plastic in the the grocery stores. This was partly of the sake of durability, so that long-distance food would do better. A lot of plastic from both private home and a bigger industry ended up in the ocean. Microplastic and nanoplastic were the biggest concern. It caused sick fish and damaged the ecosystem. The last thing is the species in Trondheim in 2020 was treated due to overfishing of the whitefish, ballast water, introduced new species, and climate change. And because of climate change, the species that lived south had to move further north, and this affected the other marine animals and ecosystem.
Under the right-wing government, the Aquaculture Act was amended and entered into force the 1st of January 2020. The purpose of the act was described as follows. The act shall promote the profitability and competitiveness of the aquaculture industry within the framework of sustainable development and contribute to value creation on the coast. Although there were separate sections for environmental considerations, these had gaps. The ministry, which was responsible for issuing permits and, as described in the law, could make exceptions, was not appointed as a selection of experts or marine biologists. The goal of economic growth and at the same time consideration for the environment did not agree. There were loopholes for those who first and foremost want to make money on the new oil. Section 19 was to facilitate the purchase and sale of licenses between the players. In other words, fish farming companies that had been allocated a certain amount of maximum permitted biomass and a locality could buy more. It was not allowed to rent out such permits. This helped to squeeze out smaller players and give a monopoly to the largest ones. But what's happening today in the year 2040? Today, the oil industry has been phased out and the economy has gone from an exponential to a circular model. Salmon farming is important for the economy of Norway, but the new oil does not only consist of salmon. Kelp and seaweed has become important too. Reduced production has given nature room to repair itself. Renewable energy and reuse of materials are important for the production and the infrastructure. Both farmed and wild fish live better now than in 2020.
In the year 2020, there were, generally speaking, two groups divide into sides. One group that was sustainable and environment friendly, and the other groups is that had economy and their main interest. For example, the Ministry of Environment said, if we continue to farm fish the way we do now, soon the wild salmon will extinct. While the fish farm workers said, fish is sustainable in the way of how much feed it needs per ton of meat. The fish use a little energy, there is a little movement, and the rest just goes to growth. Why something in between would be a good marine biologist said, Titanic effect. Titanic did not have enough lifeboat for anyone. Now it's mandatory to have enough lifeboat for everyone on board on a ship. That means we need to gather knowledge rather than wait for consequences. This means that these two groups need to find their meeting point. But like a center research developer says, he thinks the opportunity for innovation is great, but regulation and documentation take really long time to change.
This is the main leverage points that made an impact on the situation of today in 2040. CO2 emissions, nutrients emissions, escape, salmon lice, fish farm industry, attitude change, microplastic, endangered species, and the legislation. Here, you can see how they influenced each other on a micro, meso, and macro level. For example, on a meso level, the Norwegian law of aquaculture influenced the fish farm industry, and this industry caused a lot of problems on the micro level, such as salmon lice.
We are now going to show our interventions through this map of Hitra in 2040, before we zoom in detail into one of our interventions called Gulla. So if we zoom into the map, one of the first interventions is the transition into modern fish farm and kelp farming. So one of our main interventions has been to move the fish farms offshore in smaller autonomous vessels that we've called Gulla X. Since Hitra is transitioning away from fish farming to farming kelp and seaweed, Gulla can be used in fish farming as well as kelp farming in the future and today. These vessels are controlled from land and can move around autonomously depending on weather and water conditions, which gives it great advantages in farming, which we will look into more shortly. So Hitra in 2040 has transitioned from fossil to renewable energy. In 2040, import and export goods has been reduced. So mango salsa is now a rarity in the grocery stores, and self-sufficient seasonal diets are more common. Fish farms no longer run on diesel aggregates or other fossil fuels, but have transitioned into using biogas and renewable energy. Renewable energy resources together with transport industry. The wind farm that was previously on land on Hitra has been moved offshore, where it provides the electricity for the island, as well as charging ports for the fish kelp vessels, and this without taking up valuable land. So by specializing in kelp and seaweed production, Trøndelag and Hitra has become experts in utilizing the food chain and its nutrients. Kelp and seaweed is used in food for people as well as fish, where it takes the pressure off international soy import. The sun conditions during summer facilitate the boost in growth of kelp and seaweed. And the byproducts from seaweed and fish are reused in the factory along the coast at Hitra. This is a utilization of the food chain where the feces from farmed salmon is collected and converted into biogas and fertilizer. The fertilizer is then used to increase growth in kelp and seaweed production. Another intervention is the improved fish farming. So in the transition phase where Hitra is still farming fish, the impact of the escaped farmed salmon is reduced by moving the facilities offshore in the Gulla X vessels. This gives the farmed salmon a much longer way to the local rivers, which according to a 2020 report had good effect in preventing the wild and farmed salmon from spawning together. In 2040, the cages are also smaller and the boat structure is safer, which provides better control of the fish.
Another advantage with smaller cages is that the salmon lice do not spread in the same way as in 2020. If the fish were to escape, it would not bother young salmon along the coast and infect them with the lice. In the production of Gulla X and other coastal industries, where there is used recycled plastic that has been cleansed out from the ocean. There is no more plastic production. It is replaced with biomaterials. Bioplastic is made next to the kelp and seaweed production to reduce transport and energy use. As exports abroad has been greatly reduced, ballast water, including new species, is no longer a problem. Control of nutrient discharges has made aquatic organisms live better in the marine ecosystem. Only use of renewable energy and the removal of plastic made from the sea has also helped a lot. The marine ecosystem is now characterized by more growth. A research center at Hitra takes samples and monitors the marine ecosystem. Their job is to ensure that lice, escapes, and other critical conditions are under control. Looking after wild salmon is another important part of the research center's work. This is a popular center that provides many jobs to the locals. The change of attitude along the people make a great deal. A troop of young adults are stationed on Hitra to get a better understanding on both local scale ecosystems and national providing services. This is a collaboration with the Norwegian Defense of Natural Resources. The tourism industry contributes to positive experience with the sustainable production. People can eat delicious meals from kelp and seaweed at the local restaurant, Tango. Plant-based diets are no longer radical, but a new normal. Those who want can also participate in local cultivation processes, where hemp has become a major industry. For example, it is possible to build your own hemp cabin.
Moving on, we're looking at some details of Gulla X and some of its main functions. So the vessel is built from hard recycled plastic material produced on Hitra by T4 local industry team. It's remotely controlled and can move autonomously in relation to weather conditions, water quality, seasonal changes, and food production. It has a bottom filter that separates valuable nutrients that are recycled and used in the production of biogas and fertilizer. It can form group formations in stormy weather to make it more stable. It has automatic feeding, where the feed is made partly from kelp and seaweed. In time when traditional fish farming has been phased out, Gulla can transition to produce kelp and seaweed. It runs on electricity, and in addition to the built-in solar panels, it can be charged in charging ports located off and on the shore.
The aquaculture law has been changed as well. In 2040, maximum allowable biomass per cage is reduced and adjusted with a barometer that measures the conditions in the marine ecosystem. According to the new law, the ministry that makes regulations and issues permits must also consult with an independent expert committee. This expert committee must not belong to a political party, and there must be a minimum of 4 marine biologists. Section 1, the purpose of the Act is now described as follows. The Act shall promote aquaculture industry within the framework of sustainable development and contribute to justifiable value creation along the coast. Section 2, subject matter has been changed to the Act applies to the production of aquatic organisms. Aquatic organisms are all aquatic animals and plants in the marine ecosystem. The whole ecosystem must be taken into account, not just parts of it. Competitiveness and economic growth are no longer the main focus of the law. Section 19, transfer of aquaculture permits, has been removed. This will ensure that the sale of permits does not take place under the table. This is now emphasized in Section 4. Transfer of aquaculture permits is not permitted. This is just some of the changes. The PDF to the left contains all the changes that has been done.
And then we have some overlaps with the other expert committees. As mentioned before, the local industry committee makes bioplastic from kelp and seaweed that comes from our boat Gulla X. And the Gulla X is made of recycled plastic herself, come and this is from the ocean. The plastic comes from the ocean. And then we have Tango, kelp and seaweed restaurant, together with the district culture, tourism committee. And we have hemp production cabins and home offices with them together as well. Then there is the hub on Hitra. That is a cooperation between municipalities, districts, and industry in the hub with the district politics committee. And from the Committee of the Land-Based Food and Fiber Production, young people from the Norwegian Defense of Natural Resources are stationed on the Research and Culture Center on Hitra, which is here on the map too, that you can see.
The restructuring that has taken place at Hitra in Trøndelag and in Norway points in an optimistic direction for nature and our surroundings. Sustainability is no longer a part of the future, it is now. Looking ahead the future, it is important to maintain this holistic way of thinking. All changes made in nature should be put in a larger system. In the future, there will be new discoveries of natural resources, and it is important to reflect on what will happen if the resources are taken out and multiplied. The use of resources will always have a consequence as a part of a food chain and a larger ecosystem developing through thousands of years. Not only local ecosystem, but also on a national and an international level. Although exports and import is not as common as before, this makes agreements such as EU even more important. We have to maintain sustainable development across the globe. In other hands, a well-functioning democratic system government, collaborating and listening to each other.